What is up guys, welcome back to another video. Today I have my long-term review of the DJI AVATA 2. I've been flying this drone for the past, I would say 5 months, since I had it for about a month before the official release. So I have a lot of things to say, I have a lot of thoughts on this drone, and without wasting any time, let's get right into it. Starting out first with the overall flying experience that I've had with this drone, and I can say it has been mostly positive. I've been very pleasantly surprised by the flying characteristics of the AVATA 2, especially comparing it to the AVATA 1. All the things that I lacked in the AVATA 1 have been fixed here. So now we have a lot more agility, we have a lot more smoothness and speed combined. So this feels great for the type of flying that I'm doing. As you guys know, I'm not a freestyle pilot. I'm not into flips and rolls all the time, although this drone can definitely do that for you. I just don't really feel the need for those in my shots. Of course, it's not meant to do dives and to fly over mountain ridges. For that, I always prefer to have a larger drone without any ducts, but for pretty much anything else which requires smooth cinematic type of flying, this can do the job. So I feel very confident in this drone, and I'll tell you a little bit more about my confidence in this drone a little bit later in this video. And I don't want to forget this because it's very, very important. The noise that this drone makes is definitely so much better compared to traditional cinewhoops, to small cinewhoops, to the AVATA 1. The pitch is a lot less annoying, it's a lot more manageable, and it's not something that everyone looks at when they hear the drone. They don't really care about this noise that the drone makes, and I've experimented a lot with that when flying close to people. They don't really care about this drone that much, especially as opposed to other cinewhoops that are just screaming, and it's like this screeching sound that is super annoying for everyone, including myself. With the AVATA 2, you don't get that. You get a semi-screeching noise that is not as annoying as it was on other drones. So definitely a major point for the AVATA 2 when it comes to the noise that it makes. Now, the camera is my absolute favorite thing about the AVATA 2. Obviously, the fact that it's an all-in-one camera, the one that you use to get the signal from in your goggles and to record on, is just spectacular. The image quality, the boost coming from the O3 air unit, for example, is a very noticeable one. It's a massive difference, and I cannot wait to see DJI release hopefully an O4 air unit, or they might even go for the next one. I don't know. I have no idea about that, but I just love the look of this camera. It's the exact same sensor, the exact same everything from the Osmo Action 4, so you already know that this thing is a beast when it comes to camera characteristics. Even in lower light conditions, you can still get a lot out of this camera. With the D-Log-M in 10-bit, you can extract so much out of the footage if you decide that you want to shoot in a flat color profile. That's what I would recommend you to do, and I've been only shooting in D-Log-M because I just love color grading D-Log-M. The difference between the flat color profile footage and the footage that you end up with after color grading is just spectacular, in my opinion. You can get a lot of saturation, a lot of vibrance, a lot of really punchy, contrasty, good-looking footage out of the AVATA 2, so I couldn't be happier with the footage that I'm getting out of this drone. If you notice, I have an ND32 filter on the drone, which pretty much lives on the drone, as I pretty much only fly this drone in bright and sunny conditions and in manual mode, in manual camera settings. So because of that, I always need the highest ND filter available, which in the case of the ND filters that come in the kit with the AVATA 2 is the ND32. Now you can of course always purchase third-party ND filters from Freewell, which go up to ND64 for example, but I found out that ND32 is more than enough in my use case for shooting in broad daylight when we have a lot of sun. ND64 might be usable for situations where you have snow, for example, or I don't know, maybe if you're filming in the desert. But for regular scenarios, ND32 is more than enough. So make sure you lock your settings to get the most out of this camera so you can still have a lot of motion blur. I hate myself when I forget to bring my ND filters, which is the case for this example here where I didn't have my ND filters. I brought my O3 ND filters and I forgot to get the ones that are for the AVATA 2. They look very similar, but Obviously the ones for the AVATA 2 are a little bit bigger, and because of that you cannot get the good motion blur that you normally do get when you lock your shutter speed on the AVATA 2, but that's my bad. Besides locking your manual camera settings and using D-Lock M to get the most out of the camera of the AVATA 2, I would also advise you to lower the sharpness of the AVATA 2 in the advanced camera settings that you can find in the goggles to -2 or -1. It really depends on your taste, but I prefer to set it to -2 so I can have less digital sharpness added to my footage, so I can add that later in post if I want to. It's really easy to add it, but it's impossible to take it away from your footage, so it's always best to just take the most sharpness as possible from the footage and then add it yourself depending on what type of sharpness you feel the footage deserves. One thing I have to say as a person who flies a lot of FPV is that the AVATA 2 has made me get rid of most of my drones all the way up until 6-inch drones. I don't use anything else besides the AVATA 2. It's small enough so I can go through gaps, it's not noisy, it's still powerful, and I don't really use 5-inch drones anymore. I'm just not such a fan of the 5-inch drones for what I do. I don't do freestyle like I said earlier, and for longer range flights I have my 6-inch drone and have my 10-inch Helion, which is a beast, and I think it's more than enough for what I need. So I kind of cover all the bases with this drone up until long range flying. So for me this is great, and if I really want to capture something that has a lot more flips and rolls and more acro stuff, and maybe if I'm shooting a drift event for example, I can still use my 6-inch drone, which has plenty of power, and I can just replace the antennas for example, because currently I'm using some really long ones for long range. But it's that easy for me to get rid of everything else, because this is doing the job just as good. And the major thing about a drone like this is the fact that you don't need to put an additional action camera, you don't need to rely on second camera to get the good footage out of it. It gets all the job done with this integrated camera. So for me this is kind of making it so much easier to just go, fly, get the footage, and just have the footage ready after that. And speaking about footage, one thing I'm always doing is turning the stabilization off so I can then stabilize it in GyroFlow. You can use GyroFlow, the app itself, or if you're using Davinci Resolve, there's a plugin available for Davinci Resolve which gives you GyroFlow stabilization inside the application itself, which is quite neat and quite handy to have. If you want to skip one step and not go from one software to another, you can do that. Something else which I'm a big fan of when it comes to the AVATA 2 is the signal strength, and most importantly the 60 megabit per second feed that you get inside your goggles. Now I'll get to the goggles in a second, but just the fact that you have 60 megabits per second feed in the goggles as opposed to 50 on the O3 just gives you a little bit more signal strength and more visually pleasing quality inside your goggles. It's kind of like you're looking through an action camera already while you're flying, which just makes everything so much more immersive, so much more beautiful. You see so many more details, all the little branches, all the little strings of grass, all the little details are now visible, and it's a lot harder to crash because you haven't seen something. Of course, it's still possible to crash because you haven't seen something, but it's a lot less likely as opposed to what it was before. So now it's just a little bit more pleasing for me to fly, especially when flying the AVATA 2. I can really immerse myself and just enjoy the scenery when I'm flying. And when we talk about signal strength, there's no way not to mention the FCC Hack on the AVATA 2, because it's something that many people are using, and if you want to use that, there are plenty of videos and tutorials on YouTube on how to do that, but this FCC Hack can pretty much unlock the full power of the AVATA 2. It gives you more speed, as the European models of the AVATA 2 are limited to 19 meters per second. That unlocks the full power, which I believe is about 27 meters per second, which is quite a lot. And also that boosts the signal strength quite a lot, so you don't have to worry about losing signal any longer. Not that you were worrying before, because the AVATA 2 is quite strong when it comes to signal strength, even in CE mode, so I really can't complain about that. But it just gives you one step more of, confidence that you don't really think about losing this drone, even if you push it too hard and you lose signal, you know that it's going to come back to you to the home point. It has a lot of security features integrated and implemented, so you don't really have to worry that much about flying FPV. And when it comes to FPV, this is always the number one thing. You never know if you're going to get your drone back when you fly it. It's always a risk that you're taking every single flight that you take. So with the AVATA 2, you're diminishing this stress level and this risk by quite a lot. So this is quite a big factor in terms of giving you peace, giving you confidence, and feeling good about flying with this drone. So major thing that makes me really want to fly this more. One of the biggest things that I enjoy about this drone, besides everything else that I've talked about up until this point, is this thing, the battery life, which has been fantastic for me. And I end up always just using one battery per location. I don't, or rarely switch batteries to fly more, just because I have about 13, 14, 15 minutes of flight time with each battery. And for that, if you know what you're doing, if you are kind of prepared for what you want to capture, you can capture it within this time frame of flying with one battery, so you can save the rest of the batteries if you have them and go to other locations and capture more footage. So for me, this is always great, because with traditional cinewhoops, you get 3, 4, 5, maximum 5 minutes of flight time, and by the time you are kind of adjusted to the controls of the drone, you're kind of used to the feeling of flying a drone if it's your first ever battery for the day. By the time you get used to that, you have to land. So it's always one battery to get started, and then you need to switch, land, get the next battery ready, and fly again to actually capture the shot. With this, the whole process is just a lot easier. So 13, 14, 15 minutes of flight time is what I'm usually getting with each battery. And I have to be frank, like I said, I end up always just flying, for the most part, one battery at a location, and then I'm ready to capture some more footage on the next one, which is great because I can just rely on the 3 batteries that I have to capture a lot more shots, as opposed to getting 10 batteries with me to fly regular FPV, which is, you know, a little bit more cumbersome. Of course, it's not all sunshine and rainbows with this drone, as it's not perfect, it's far from perfect, but there are some things that I want to mention when it comes to things that I don't like, and one of them is the fact that this drone is not easy to repair by yourself. So if you happen to crack the frame, for example, there is no easy way to replace it yourself, as for example, the AVATA 1 was far easier to repair yourself, to get the spare parts. Even the third-party accessories were a lot more accessible. Here, I haven't really seen that many third-party accessories for the AVATA 2, and there is not really an easy way to get this repaired by yourself. So you always have to send it over to DJI in case something happens to it, so they can fix it and send it back to you. So that, you know, loses you a lot of valuable, precious time to fly this drone. So I'm not a really big fan of this. So I would have really appreciated if DJI came out with some accessories that they can give you, so you can have a little bit more peace of mind knowing that you have some spare parts available in case you bump this into something a little bit harder and you crack the frame, or you damage some components of the drone. Now, granted, I have crashed this drone many times and I still haven't had any issues with it. The frame is quite rigid and quite strong, but this is an FPV drone after all, and with FPV you have to be prepared for anything that can happen at any single moment. So yeah, that's just an observation from mine that I just wanted to share with you. I'm not really a big fan of the fact that this is a very closed ecosystem and it's not easy to repair the drone yourself if you want to. Now for a second, let's focus on the peripherals that you're using to fly this drone. The Goggles 3, the RC Controller 3, and the RC Motion Controller 3. Now, there are a few things that I have to say about each of these things. Let's start with the RC Motion Controller 3. First off, this thing is extremely addictive and very fun to fly. I highly advise you to use this yourself if you haven't had the chance to use it, and to give this to someone who has never flown a drone before. It's really interesting to get their reactions and see how easy it is to actually control the drone, and it's also super comfortable, super intuitive, and the controls are great. So highly recommend it if you don't have this accessory to buy it. This is what you normally would use to fly this drone, especially if you want to fly it in manual mode. So this is a must in my opinion. This is kind of like more like a toy to play around with, to give it to your children, to your wife, to some friends of yours. That might be the fun part of flying. This is the extremely fun part of flying, when you can get in manual mode, when you can start diving and using the full speed of the drone. This is a game changer in my opinion. So those are two different things, two different ways of controlling the drone. You can get great shots with both of these, but I recommend the remote, of course, to really get the whole experience of flying the AVATA 2. This is an additional bonus that can give you some great memories, a lot of fun with your friends and family, but it's not ideal to only use that to fly the AVATA 2. Now the Goggles 3 are my absolute favorite pairs of goggles that I've ever used. Some people still prefer the Goggles 2, but these for me are the best goggles available on the market, the best fit, the most comfortable goggles. They don't need any additional accessories, they don't need additional foam or additional strap or anything else. They are just perfect as they are. Now one thing I have to talk about when it comes to the goggles is these AR cameras that DJI introduced on this model. They can allow you to see around yourself without removing the goggles from your head. I have to be frank, I only used that feature in the beginning while I was trying it out for a couple of times, and then I just completely forgot that it exists. I have turned it on by mistake when putting the goggles on my head, but other than that, I've never really felt the need to look around with the goggles without removing them from my head. When I stop flying, I just remove the goggles altogether from my head. I don't need to look around while I have the goggles. It's a cool feature. It might be a little bit gimmicky. For some people, it might really work. For me, it's just not something that I see myself using a lot or at all. And one final thing, since DJI recently updated the firmware on the Goggles 3 and on the RC Controller 3, we can now use these two accessories with all of our custom FPV drones with O3 air unit, which for me has been something that I've been just crazy about since I had these goggles, because they are just the most comfortable goggles and I want to use them every single time. I don't want to go back to the Goggles 2. Now I can do that with the Goggles 3 and all of my drones, and I feel great about flying with them. And with this setup, of course, I'm using an additional radio. I'm not using this one for my custom drones, but it's so much easier to have just one pair of goggles and not having to worry about which drone I'm going to use. So I don't have to use two sets of goggles anymore. So with that being said, generally I'm very extremely happy with the AVATA 2. Like I said, I've got rid of most of my drones up until the 6-inch size, because the AVATA 2 is that good and just it replaces them all for the most part. If I want speed, if I want super agility and acro stuff, I would use my 6-inch drone. If I want super long range, I would use my 10-inch Helion drone. But for anything else, I'm going to use the AVATA 2. With the built-in quality, with the signal strength, the security that it has, and gives me so much peace of mind. And with the super long battery life, I cannot be happier with this. Now, it's not performing amazingly well in every single scenario, especially when you have wind around, but still it gives me so much confidence and so much joy that I couldn't be happier with what this drone gives me. So this is pretty much everything that I have for today's video. I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know if you did by clicking on the like button and subscribing down below for more videos like this one. Drop a comment if you have any questions. I would love to help you out if I can. And this is Mike from Drone Supremacy. Take care everyone, and I'll catch you in the next one. Ciao.